Good afternoon, this is Frank Katsakria. I'm going to be the first of three videos on the previous election we just had here in 2018. This first video is going to be on some results that people aren't really thinking about, but will actually have a major impact on stuff to move forward. So like and subscribe, or, well, hate and comment. Either way, I'm happy. So this first video is going to talk about elections that in and of themselves people may not think as being major, but they really are. First one I'm going to talk about is in the great state of Nevada with the Senate and governor's races. Now, over the last few years, Nevada has been quote unquote a purple state, but after the election of Sisolak and Rosin, you can pretty much just call it a purple state at this point. And it's very important because in 2020, Nevada is the third state that will vote in the Republican and Democratic caucuses. Now, the Republicans, assuming Donald Trump runs for re-election and doesn't get a challenger, which I think is pretty certain at this point, and I'll explain that later. Democrats, this is going to be their third contest, probably going to be a caucus, and you now have two major gets to get out there to up your ante if you're running against Hillary Clinton. Why Hillary would you run again? But it'll probably be Hillary Clinton to try to win that Nevada caucus. Now, another state that people are probably not talking about is New York. Now, everyone knows that New York reelected Andrew Cuomo, but that's not the race that I care about. The races that I care about involve the state Senate. Now, the state Senate, unbelievably, for a state that is known to be as blue as New York is, has basically been in Republican control one way or the other since the 30s. In fact, if Republicans didn't have an outright majority of the state Senate, either through third parties or even renegade Democrats, they have held the state Senate. And renegade Democrats have been, this year, over the last 5. They lost 7 Republicans in the state Senate. And for the first time ever in 2020, when they start the process of redistricting, Republicans will not have a leg in where they stand. So I'm going to show you a map, and yeah, I know I could make this a little bit cooler, but screw it, I'm lazy. This is the map of the great state of New York. And so New York is going to lose a congressional seat. This is how it's going to break down. 21 has been a site that Democrats have carved over and prayed that they could get their hands on forever. Albany, big and blue. 22 and 19 were Republican, but just flipped Democratic. You have 24. Syracuse is the only major city in the state of New York that does not have a Democratic representative. And down here in Staten Island, that flipped Democrat, but that basically just flipped Democrat because the guy was indicted. So that one's going to go back to being a Republican. But what will happen is the Democrats will take this district, put Plattsburgh, probably grapple Messina in there, and throw them into the northern half of Albany. The southern half of Albany will go with a major part of 19. 18 will clear up some of these Republican areas down here. 22 will get this part of 21. Watertown, Fort Drum, Oswego. That'll be one district, so that'll be your one Republican. Syracuse, the most reddest parts closest to Rochester will flow into there. 27 will move a little bit closer to here. They're going to lose sides from both Rochester and Buffalo. Those are big and blue. They're going to move a little bit down here to 23, pick up some Democrats. 23 is going to eat over some Republicans here. So in this area here, which is traditionally 4 Republican, 1 Democrat, right now it's 3 Democrat, 2 Republican, you're going to have 3 Democrats, 1 Republican. 27 is going to be a toss-up. And while Staten Island could easily be divided in such a way that you could make it very Democratic, unlikely you'll do that. New Yorkers don't want to have Staten Island without its own congressman. They don't even like it right now that a small part of Brooklyn is in the district. So they won't cut it in half. Not because it's in the best interest of the Democrats. They won't do it because they just don't want Staten Island to threaten to leave the city of New York again. That's a lot of tax revenue, and most importantly, that's a lot of cops and firemen who don't want to be represented outside of New York City. And so that's why that race is important. Now, also, when we're talking about redistricting, you can't mention Michigan without being in part of this discussion, but not why you would think. So Michigan elected a Democratic governor, Republican state house and state senate, you would think, oh, great, redistricting, civil war, bring it on. And the reality is the people in the state of Michigan, in a not very well talked about amendment, changed their constitution to change how they redistrict. So instead of being up to the state legislature and the governor, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 people who allegedly have no political ideology of any sort will be making up your 13-member commission to redistrict. Now, just like New York, Michigan's going to lose at least a seat. Michigan also is very odd in that its population still has not caught up to what it was in 2000. It's the only state that lost population in 2010 and is very close to maybe crossing the 2000 level mark. Because, quite frankly, you don't know who's going to be on that commission. And whenever people talk about, nonpartisan commissions, they always bring up California. But what they don't tell you about California is California, while some areas got very much more competitive, Republicans actually lost a lot of ground. And it wasn't because Republicans were overrepresented in Washington. Democrats in 2010, the last time they redistrict, they had this plan in there. But in 2000, Gray Davis was the governor of California. The state Senate was Democrat. The state House was Democrat. And yet, Republicans lost seats with redistricting in a nonpartisan way. Part of it was because some nonpartisan groups were actually led by Democratic operatives who got areas of Orange County and San Diego County to group very red areas together. Moderate Republican areas now were in Democratic areas, and slowly and surely, Democrats have picked up seats where without this commission, they probably wouldn't have had any of that choice. So be wary, Michigan, of what you asked for. You may have lost a lot of Democratic votes. You may have lost a lot of Republican votes, depending on where you're at. Finally, I'm going to talk about the state that I know very, very well, and that's Florida. Now, Florida, there's 2 big things that came out of this election that people aren't really talking about. The first one is the election of governor. Now, yes, Republicans have had a Republican governor for 20 years. They get him for 4 more. Why is that a big deal? Well, because even though Republicans have controlled the state governor's mansion for 20 years and the state House and Senate for 22, they have never controlled the state Supreme Court. Supreme Court is a 4-3 Democratic majority. You will see this play out in the recount where Rick Scott will lose a motion, and my bet is that he will not sit in the United States Senate until May. But because there are 3 retirements that'll kick in January, Ron DeSantis will make those appointments. For the first time, Republicans will have a majority, 6-1. And when it comes to redistricting, instead of the Amendment 4 passed in 2008, which said you had to have all these square boxes, at the same time, you have a federal Civil Rights Act, Civil Voting Rights Act that says you have to protect blacks and minority districts, and the state Senate, or the state Supreme Court would always decide with Amendment 4 that passed in 08 instead of over black voting rights. Now, when the House and Senate and the governor pass the various bills to do redistricting with African American and Latino support, it's highly likely that they will not have those districts thrown out time and time again. And you will see more African American and Latino representation in both Tallahassee and Washington. Florida is expected to gain 1, possibly 2 seats in the House of Representatives. And normally what happens is you create a district that's in Miami, and you create a district somewhere else to give 1 to African Americans, 1 to Hispanics. So Miami will get, or Florida will be bigger, more Republican, and at the same time, more minorities represented in Congress. So like and subscribe, and this is the first of 3. Next video I'm going to have is how it can be important if some other stuff happens. And then we'll go into it ain't shit. Elections that really didn't matter. Thanks.